Welcome to the Green Goddess Podcast. I'm your host, Tara Rose. Today on our show, we have a special guest, an expert on the Blue Lotus, which is a sacred herb with a strong mystical history. And our guest today is the Reverend Aryshta Dean. Aryshta Dean is an expert on the Blue Lotus who has traveled the world studying this medicine and has facilitated many different types of journeys, psychedelic journeys, using the Blue Lotus. And she's here today to talk with us about the Blue Lotus as a sacred herb. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about the Blue Lotus.
The Blue Lotus is actually a water lily, and its scientific name is the Nymphaea. Um, it is originally from Egypt, along the banks of the Nile, and it was used in conjunction with other plants and fungi for thousands of years by the Egyptians, and then later the Greeks, and then finally the Romans. There's some indication that it also wound up in India as part of the Hindu traditions. It is by itself not psychedelic. It is barely psychotropic. It is what is called a allosteric modulator. It binds with the neuroreceptors that are the same ones that are responsible for our psychedelic trips, and it changes the experience slightly. In our research, we've discovered that it facilitates the mystical experience. It facilitates the ability to have that oneness with however you see God or goddess.
Yes, thank you. I know that it's sometimes mixed in tea for mushroom journeys.
Yes, you're not going to get much effect that way because the alkaloids in the Blue Lotus are alcohol soluble. They're not water soluble. So the way to really do this is to mix it with wine. Let it steep for a couple of days, 3 days. Best way to do it is to actually ferment the flowers together. Currently, the best results are coming from mead. But yeah, you need alcohol. So, and
Ah,
you don't want to use too strong alcohol because then it will just kind of burn the plant and you get mush. So we found that alcohol contents about 10%, 12% at the most work the best.
oh, that's such valuable information. Thank you so much
Mm-hmm.
for sharing that. And for anyone that doesn't know, mead is a form of a wine with honey, right? Honey wine?
It is made with honey, right? There's no grapes involved. It's just fermented honey, yeast, and in this case, we add the Blue Lotus flowers to it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So this is sort of like a tincture, what you're saying.
Yes, it's used much like a tincture. Its absorption is sublingual. It is all absorbed in the mouth and the throat. By the time it gets to the stomach acid will kill it. So the absorption all happens in the mouth. So the way you actually use this is that you have to hold it in your mouth until it just dissolves into water, and you slowly swallow it. Yeah, that's the way it works.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you
Hmm.
so much for sharing that. Now we know how to
Yeah.
use and well, I shouldn't say use. We now know how to connect with the magic of the Blue Lotus. So it's through um, acquiring a Blue Lotus tincture, ideally of honey wine, of mead, or making our own. I've actually
Right.
found dried Blue Lotus flowers recently at an herb store. Um,
Hmm.
and I was really excited to find that because I think it's not too common to find, right? It's kind of hard to
It's
find.
there's only one farm in the world that grows it. You have to be careful because the market is flooded with Blue Lotus from Sri Lanka, and usually looks a little bit too purple, but it is not Nymphea caerulea, regardless of what it says on the package. We've tested it, we've tried it, there's zero effects from it. So you absolutely must make sure that your source is from Thailand. Like I said, there's only one farm in Thailand growing it.
Wow, so this is a really special and rare herb.
It's it's virtually extinct in Egypt. And the Thai blue lotus is a different variety. Nobody in the last 25 years has even seen blue lotus in Egypt. So we're assuming that the effects are similar, but honestly, we don't know. Because, like I said, it is a different variety of that water lily between the Egyptian and the Thai.
So this is a fully legal herb at this point, at
It is
least
fully
in
legal.
yes,
There's only a couple places in the world that it's been outlawed, and one of them is Louisiana,
really. Huh.
because people were using Blue Lotus in substitute for cannabis, and so the good government of Louisiana outlawed it. It's the only state in the union it's not legal, and of course the other place is Russia, and they outlawed it for the same reason.
Interesting. I actually recently tried smoking it. I thought of
Mm-hmm.
you. And I saw it in this herb store and I tried it and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't do anything much for me except make me feel kind of like my heart was racing a bit and I didn't like
If
the
you use it
feeling.
just by itself, my recommendation is always if you're going to smoke it, then it needs to be blended with a good cannabis. And the best cannabis, I will say, for all of this work is sativa. You're after a heady spiritual experience, and your good old fashioned sour diesel is the best go to.
That is such incredible information. Thank you so much. Wow,
You're
this is
welcome.
amazing. Our listeners are so blessed to have you today to hear this. This is awesome.
And I've been on this path for a while.
So tell us,
I started working with the Blue Lotus in 2005. Yeah, I think about 2005 was my first experience with it. And I was going to a mystery school, and one of my mentors had mentioned the Blue Lotus. And for me, it was just this instant resonance. I don't know what gong chimed inside of my head, but it was it was as if I'd always known. And I just became passionate, and went to Egypt in 2010, discovering all the stuff that isn't in the history books. There's Blue Lotus on every temple and every tomb, and it is frequently shown as being held up to the face. And the Egyptologists of the 19th century, even into the 20th century, thought that, oh, that was because it was a nice, sweet-smelling flower and it's perfume. No, all they had to do is stick their nose in that flower. It has no scent, virtually no scent at all. So it was not a perfume.
hmm,
Um, so the observation is that there's only one other object that's ever been presented to the face like that in all of Egyptology, and that is the Ankh, the key of everlasting life. And so this being a known psychotropic, and they believed that the blue lotus flower was actually a god. It is the only time in human history that a single plant was dedicated to a deity. So they knew something was extremely special about this plant. And presenting it up to the face like this is also the representation of taking that into oneself through the mouth and the nose, is that is the orifice for entry into the body. And so therefore the blue lotus presented like that was that you were becoming like the flower, that the flower was coming into you. So from there, a couple years later, I wound up in Greece because then I wanted to be able to trace the flower across the Mediterranean. And I discovered that there's all kinds of stuff that's, rarely talked about or not in the history books. There is a priestess, a full-size statue, mortuary statue of a priestess from about 550 BC that she is ordained, just decorated in blue lotus flowers. Then the unique thing about that is blue lotus doesn't grow in Greece, never has grown in Greece, can't grow in Greece. And so those flowers had to come from Egypt. So that presents a real interesting thing about the value of these flowers, not just being pretty, but that they were certainly being used spiritually and medicinally.
Thank you. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. So, I'm curious how it can be used. So it's an activator basically. So we use it with something like cannabis or mushrooms. What else can it be used with?
Um, it, of course, I have to be careful about, what I'm going to say publicly. Um, but it is binding into the DNA receptor of the 5-HT2A neuroreceptor that is where all of our hallucinogens are received. So psilocybin, ayahuasca, and LSD are all coming through the 5-HT2A neuroreceptor. So anything that comes through there, then theoretically, the Blue Lotus is going to modulate. And when I say modulate, is what happens is that there's two chemicals, primary chemicals in Nymphia caerulea. One is aporphine, and the other is nucephrine. Aporphine is this allosteric modulator that binds horizontally across the DNA strands. So when that chemical squeezes itself in there, then it elongates and twists the DNA. So when then you have your experience of any hallucinogen, in this case we'll talk psilocybin, then the effect that has been reported by about a half 100 people we've tested, the major report was that all of the classical psilocybin light show, geometric shapes, patterns, most of those go away. And in place of that, then you get this mystical experience.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Would you be willing to share a little bit about the plant spirit itself, the lotus itself, and what you get from this, from your time, your experience?
It is when we're talking mystical experience, we're talking about the ultimate subjective experience, the epitome of personal. And in that, this oneness with the universe, this communion with God or goddess, with the Blue Lotus, it facilitates an opportunity for communication. Now, everybody's going to view this differently depending on where you're coming from in your own religious views. I started out as a pure atheist. I have an engineering degree and I was very straight-laced. When I had my first mystical experience with psilocybin, it opened up and made me see that the universe was alive, that there's this force we call life, this energetic, was all pervasive through the universe, and it was conscious. That's all I can say. And so with the Blue Lotus, that plant also has a consciousness. You hear the shamans and our indigenous teachers talk about that of plants have consciousness. And we've been able to prove that in the lab. That's not even debatable, is that plants have their own consciousness. But it goes beyond that when we're dealing with entheogens and the binding with our neuroreceptors, whether it be the psilocybin, as the indigenous elders of Mexico talk about, calling them the little ones, or in the case of the Egyptians, talking about the Blue Lotus as being the god Nefertem. Yeah, there's life in there, and it can communicate to you.
I love that. So do you have an opinion and a personal experience about this particular spirit being? Do you find it to be particularly, I mean, when I tune into it, I'm feeling a feminine energy from it. What do you feel?
And that is true. Nefertem literally means beautiful one, and he is Prince of the Nile, like the most gorgeous young man ever. So he is a soft and sensual type of spirit. So that can come across as feminine. But trying to put it into my own personal experience with them, I think I want to say most importantly is I'm fascinated with understanding of why he comes back out of the mists of time at this particular moment in history. You gotta understand, the last time that Blue Lotus was used culturally was at the end of Rome. This was the medicine that was used by the cult of Isis. And it was a mystery cult, and the initiation ceremonies were using Blue Lotus and mushrooms together and sacramental wine. So, but the Blue Lotus has been gone from our society only up until this last 20 years. And then more actively since I've been working with it in the last 10 years. So, it's fascinating to me of how this spirit has pushed his way back into our consciousness to make us understand that, hello, I'm here. I believe that humanity is undergoing a transformation, and I'm not the first one to say that right now.
Obviously,
we are evolving.
For sure. Yes, for
and sure. These plants can help us evolve. Terence McKenna was famous for his stoned ape theory, and that psilocybin had literally helped evolve us down through the ages. My feeling is that I think that there is a similar history with Blue Lotus in Egypt. You have to understand that the Egyptians, in their creation mythology, believed that the first living organism on the planet was the Blue Lotus. It was the very first thing that bloomed out of the mound of creation. So they clearly knew something. And my contact with Nefertem has been that, he's back, and he wants to know that he's back, and that using this sacred plant can evolve us, can help us surmount these challenges that we face today.
Thank you. I really love what you said. So if someone listening is really feeling intrigued and wants to work with this plant, how can they get it?
There are a few reputable sites that online. I don't want to plug any particular one, but the well-known herbal online stores will carry Blue Lotus, and they will always say that it's where it's from and that it is certified Nymphia caerulea. You're going to get dried flowers. You can't export, or you actually can't import live flowers to most countries simply because of insect issues. So you can only get them by dried. Don't bother with trying to get tinctures. You never know how they've been prepared, what's in it. Always make your own. So get the dried flowers. Get a really good, nice bottle of red wine. Um, white is okay, but I like the heavier aspect of the cabs and the zins to merlots to cover up the earthy taste of the flower. So then you're going to take the wine, pour it into a nice sterile quart jar, and add a handful. I don't know. It's going to be a few ounces, maybe two, of dried blue lotus flowers, and stir it around and let it sit for a couple days. Don't refrigerate it. It likes a little bit of room temperature. Also, I do better if I let it oxidize just a little bit. Leave the lid just slightly ajar off the quart jar. Don't seal it. Don't cut. Just give it some air. Put it on your altar. Give it some TLC and some attention and some prayer. Put your energies into this. Make it mean something to you. Let it sit there for a few days on your altar, and then you can strain that off. You can eat the flowers. They're certainly edible. I don't find at all that they do anything more than the liquid itself.
Okay.
But now you've extracted your alkaloids out of the flower. So strain it off, then seal it up. Put it into some smaller bottles. Wine, it's wine. Hello, everybody knows your wine's going to oxidize and go sour after a week or two. So you want to be able to seal up some smaller bottles. Keep them in the refrigerator. Yeah. And you do not need much. I recommend a tablespoon, 2 at most, and then, like I said, hold that in your mouth, and then very, very slowly let it dissolve and swallow it slowly.
We want to let it get under the tongue, right?
Yeah, just kind of swish it around and get all the surfaces of your mouth. Yeah.
And how long of an effect are we going to get from that?
It's really short-lived. You're going to feel it for. You'll feel if it's just by itself and you're a little bit sensitive, you'll get a little head rush and it'll last 5 minutes and then it disappears. The overall effect is probably gone within 60 minutes. The best way to really get a sensation of what it's doing is to have a puff of good sativa, and you don't need a whole lot. Just get your mind expanded into it. Also increases your sensitivity of your senses. Let that sit for 5-10 minutes, sitting with the cannabis, and then have your Blue Lotus. I pretty much guarantee that you will feel the effects that way.
So when you say then have your Blue Lotus, do you mean from the tincture?
Yes.
So so when you said to mix it with sativa with cannabis, you're not saying to smoke it.
No, not in the tincture.
Wait, are you saying to smoke it?
I mean, you could do it. Yeah. The idea is that excuse me, that I'm trying, just with those two substances alone, neither one of those are going through the 5-HT2A neural receptor. I mean, the cannabis is working through the cannabinoid system, and over on the I lost it. I can't
That's
think of the
okay.
term
So
for it
so
now.
what so what I'm trying to understand is what method of ingestion are you recommending?
You're going to smoke the cannabis,
Right. But then what are
and then you're going to drink
ah,
the little sip of Blue Lotus
thank you.
wine.
That's what I was trying to understand. Okay, because
Yes, and that will give
yes.
you the greatest effect that it can give you
Okay.
without going down the road of psilocybin.
Thank you. That's super helpful. I tried to smoke it. I rolled it with some corn silk as the base
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
some ganja and some Blue Lotus, and I tried smoking the blend and I did not like that one bit.
Yeah, that's even at its best. That's first of all, the flower is really harsh. It's almost that will definitely get you coughing. Um, and yeah, the effects aren't that comfortable.
No,
You
it
know,
didn't feel good. I just felt
no.
kind of
But the but the
yeah,
but
icky.
you the Blue Lotus in the wine is a whole different sensation.
Okay, I believe you. I believe you completely. And now I want to
Yeah,
try that. Thank you
yeah,
so much. This is
right.
such good
Now
information.
again, when we're just using just those two together, um, this isn't gonna knock you out of the ballpark. This isn't a mystical experience, although you can be. Um, um, this is a very mild introduction to let you go, to let you understand that there really is something to this. You'll go, oh, I see what she's talking about. There it is. You
Okay.
almost have to hunt for it. It's not going to knock you over the head,
Okay,
you
so if we
know.
want to be knocked over the head, what is the better way to do it?
Well, again, then we're into this area of, here I can talk about it in a legal state of the Oregon, but
Don't worry
our
about
people.
that. Don't worry about that. Just share with us how we can experience this medicine.
um, Psilocybin is going to it is the greatest effect noticeable with Blue Lotus.
Okay.
Is
Thank you.
that is the way it's going to go. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Okay.
I've
But
had
mushrooms
I've had
alone are going to do that too, wouldn't you say?
They are, but what I'm saying is that with the Blue Lotus, it is noticeably different. It
Okay.
is not the same experience whatsoever.
Okay. Um so I'm wanting to ask you just a little bit more about this. So it's not the same experience. I hear that. Okay, a couple thoughts. One is I think it makes a lot of sense to pair the tincture of Blue Lotus with cannabis because, in my personal experience, cannabis often spiritually seems to act as a facilitator of
Mm-hmm.
for us to meet another plant. It sort of
Yes.
seems to do that. So I've actually had experiences where I've actually smoked a lot of weed with friends in a ceremonial setting with the intention of taking a non psychoactive plant tincture and getting to know that plant on a spiritual level. And I've had
Yes, I
really,
completely agree. And that's
yes,
that's what I meant about
yes,
working with it with
okay.
cannabis to start with.
I see that. I totally love that. So
Yep.
that makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing I'm thinking about right now is so okay, so I've not had this experience and you have. I've had experiences with mushrooms and I know that they can be incredibly profound and sacred and mystical. So I'm wondering I understand it's a bit ineffable. It's hard to put into words, but can you try to help us understand why we might really benefit from
So,
experiencing it?
yes, mushrooms by themselves will provide you a mystical experience roughly half the time. 60% is the best odds ever recorded scientifically,
Hmm.
blind, double blind studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, we can up those odds a little bit with a perfect setting, perfect ceremony, the perfect situation, the perfect shaman. We can up it a little bit, but still, it's a flip of a coin of whether or not you're going to be able to ring that bell of get your mystical experience. Now, you may say, oh, but it was the best experience of my life. But then if you do the questionnaire of what it is to be in a mystical experience, you'll still see that, oh, you didn't quite make it. The
Okay,
Blue
so
Lotus increases the odds significantly of attaining the mystical experience.
and by mystical experience, what do we mean?
You know, there are four classic indicators of you getting a mystical experience, and one is it's indescribable, right?
Right.
It is timeless. You get this sense of you lose all sense of time. There is this oneness with the universe. It is this completely ego dissolving out into the universe. Then you are one with everything. And there's this feeling of sacredness and holiness to it.
Ah.
It's like it is at a level of the angels singing, you know, the sunlight on your forehead type of, you know, setting. It is an experience unlike anything else human beings can feel.
Okay.
This is the reason that for 10,000 years of current history, we don't know for how long that they've been chasing this, but people have done everything imaginable to hit a mystical experience. They've starved themselves. They sit in the snow. They meditate for years. They chant endlessly.
Right.
They will flog themselves. They will do anything in order to hit this peak experience. And that's why then cultures like the Egyptians spent 3,000-4,000 years studying the interaction between chemicals and plants and came up with this magical formula.
Thank you so much, Aryshta. I think you've nailed it. I really understand much better now. When you said holy, that really resonated in my heart. I felt what you meant. That it's a
Think of it
holy
this way, you
experience.
know, before the time of the holy books, when we just had temples taking care of gods and goddesses and their likenesses and their statues, if you came to a priest or priestess with a question and you said, tell me what the gods want, it wasn't the job of the the uh, the priest or priestess to interpret the will of the gods. They would typically give you something to take, and they say, go out to that field and go talk to them yourself. There was this direct personal relationship with the divine, regardless of any culture, regardless of time period. This was the tried and true world. It wasn't until monotheism and the patriarchy that then created the whole power structure of going that they had all the answers and you had to go through the priesthoods to be enlightened by their word, the word that they had written down in the books.
Right.
So use of entheogens spiritually gives you the authority to take back that relationship with you and the divine. It is
Perfect.
your personal relationship.
Right. I like that you use that term entheogen. That's how the two of us have met. It's through an entheogen conference. So I love that
That's
you're
right.
bringing it back to that. Right. Experience
Yeah,
of the divine through plant medicines and other medicines. I like that.
that's right.
Yes. So Aryshta, how can people get a hold of you, get in touch with you? What's your website?
It's getting put. But yeah, I'm gonna give you this one. It'll be live here shortly. It is sacredfoundation.org, and you just contact info@sacredfoundation.org. That's the best way to get to me.
Okay. Thank you so much. And so, Aryshta, you are a speaker and presenter. I know that, and I've seen you speak and present at a conference before, Exploring Psychedelics Conference in Ashland, Oregon, which was awesome. And I know you're a researcher as well. You're publishing papers about the Blue Lotus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you're also a priestess.
I am. I'm Priestess Dices.
Priestess to Isis.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And a facilitator of Blue Lotus Journeys, yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, sacredfoundation.org is how people can connect with you further.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful that you shared your amazing knowledge on the show today. And I want to invite our listeners as well to subscribe to the Green Goddess podcast. And if you'd like to support our work, which is really about um, discussing metaphysical topics with a strong bent towards sacred medicines and the evolution of consciousness. We would love your support on Patreon. You can support us at a lot of different levels, as little as $5 or more, and we'd absolutely love it. And that's patreon.com/magicandflow. If you'd like to connect with me, Tara Rose, you can find my website, magicandflow.com. I do transformational coaching and I work with some sacred medicines, including combo frog medicine, and I train intuitive healers. You can find my courses for finding your soul purpose and igniting your spiritual gifts, and much more. Thank you for listening today, and thank you, Aryshta, so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
And as I like to end every show, may the plants be with you.